$40 million in Bitcoin just got stolen from the United States government, not from an exchange, not from any criminal or anything like that. The United States government, the same government that's been seizing billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin and said, in fact, that they are not going to buy any more Bitcoin. They are simply just going to seize more of it. So we're going to dive into all of this. But first, we've got to get into this crazy story about how a young kid in his early 20s was able to steal $40 million worth of Bitcoin from the US government. So this story gets absolutely crazy when you break it all down, because there's so many different layers to it that it is honestly very shocking. This is Zach XBT, one of the best blockchains investigators in the world. He tracks crypto scams, hacks, thefts, you name it, and he's exposed millions of dollars in fraud. Now we've seen that he said approximately $40 million in Bitcoin was just moved from the US government wallet to an unknown address. Now, when the government moves Bitcoin, they usually announce it. We're auctioning seized assets or we're consolidating wallets for security. But this time there was no announcement, no press release, nothing. And when I started digging into this, I realized that this might be the biggest crypto government theft in history, which is extremely interesting, right? Because they've got all of this and it's essentially gotten exposed over some crazy stuff, because they realize that when we dive in and go through all this, there's that $40 million worth of fraud. And you need to understand this, the US government holds a lot of Bitcoin, right? I mean, if you break down the total amount of Bitcoin the United States government has, at least according to Bitcoin Treasuries Net, have 328,000 Bitcoin. So even if you can really see this little maybe blip where they potentially sold or got some of it seized or stolen, excuse me, they still have a shit ton of Bitcoin, to say the very least. So when we're diving in to this crazy, crazy story here, we have to see that over the years, the US government has seized Bitcoin from the Silk Road, Bitfinex, and various ransomware groups, crypto fraud cases and all. And in total, the US government has now holds over 300,000 Bitcoin simply just from seized Bitcoin. And now they don't hold all of it anymore because they've auctioned some of it off, but they custody significant amounts. The government is still terrible at securing Bitcoin and their other cryptocurrencies because they treat it like cash or gold. They put it in secure government custody, but doesn't realize that it doesn't work like cash. If someone gets your private keys, it's gone forever, right? So at the end of the day, they don't realize what has to happen here. So if you go and take a dive into this story, it just gets even crazier and crazier because, you know, allegedly the US is going to be announcing a Project Crypto here in 2 days. And it's going to be their efforts to deliver on President Trump's promise to make US the crypto capital of the world. But the son of a CEO of this company that was hired by US Marshals was able to steal $40 million worth of Bitcoin, and now it appears to be running. Treasury must be able to secure his private keys from the justice, right? Because John Digida, or also named as John Lick, was able to steal this because his dad owns CMDSS, which currently has an active IT government contract in Virginia. It was awarded that contract to assist USMS in managing and disposing of the seized and forfeited crypto assets. But then shortly after, they deleted all their social media, right? Which I think is crazy because you see these transactions here, and as in part, right, they've essentially gone, you know, it was essentially like this guy John Wick went band for band, as Lil Baby likes to say, right? He was essentially just showing off to everybody that he has all of these, you know, crypto transactions moved into this wallet and essentially showing everybody, hey, look what I got. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He was showing off that he was able to seize all of these assets, right? So he did it in ETH, you know, USDT, all of these different things. And when you're able to track all of it, it looks like it was $63 million worth of inflows from separate victims, right? So all in all, the rumors kept circulating that it was this guy because he was showing off to everybody. and he was previously arrested in September 2025. And now the threat actors continue to steal the stolen funds, and then he removed all his NFT usernames and deleted all of it, dusted his public address. All of these different tactics that he used is still essentially seemingly run, right? Because at the end of the day, this crypto theft was really interesting, but I think it leads to the bigger problem that we're seeing here, right? It's not just that the United States government is trusting these third parties to hold their government or to hold the Bitcoin holdings. No. I think it's deeper than that, because when you take it into account that the US government is trying to protect you, right? They're trusting these third parties to hold tax dollars, hold banking institutions, hold gold, all of the United States assets, yet they can't even manage to hold seized assets. And they're letting some young kid essentially go and steal that. And so when we keep diving in, this story gets more and more interesting because, the key takeaways here are the live wallet activity led to attribute to this Zach XBT guy, right? This is a guy that linked it to John Lick with over 90 million in suspected frauds. And he exposed himself on Telegram just to show off to everybody. And if you trace this back, this is from the Bitfinex seizure, right? So roughly $24.9 million in that wallet was moved from the Bitfinex wallets to this guy, John, right? And the funds moved using laundering patterns. The assets were split, cycled through exchanges and bridges, then reconsolidated, a common laundering structure, right? And they were linked to a custody contractor. And the alleged suspect must be related to an executive at the firm contracted by the U.S. Marshal Service. Of course, those claims are unverified yet. But when you break it down, right, these assets have been seized. The Wave digital assets were seized back in March in 2025, right? So this kid essentially boasted on Telegram saying, hey, look at me. I was able to fool the United States government and essentially run rampant with $40 million worth of this, right? So of course, none of these theories are necessarily proven just yet, but let's list out some of the possibilities, right? The U.S. government could have been stored on a computer that was stored on the internet, and maybe they were in a cloud backup, something or other. But the government has a history of terrible OPSEC with the crypto industry. They're not crypto Bitcoin native, of course. They don't use cold storage. This is not something that, it is intuitive to them. They haven't used multi-signature or anything like that previously, right? So someone compromised that system, or could have compromised the system, is essentially the other option, right? It could have been hacked, or essentially, whoever had access to this could have gotten access and just moved it over, which is seemingly what looked like what happened, right? Zach XBT essentially looked at these guys and said, hey, the IRS is not able to securely hold Bitcoin. They're not able to securely look at who has and who is holding Bitcoin. They're essentially like having a ton of difficulty just managing this whole new ecosystem. And so how could they possibly be trusted to hold their own, right? So the external hack seems somewhat unlikely because of the speed that it happened, right? If you hack a government wallet and steal $40 million, you immediately start tumbling and that Bitcoin through mixers and converting it and doing all these different kinds of things. You don't wait, right? You don't leave it sitting. But according to the blockchain.com and some of these other trackers, this Bitcoin moved and it sat there for a while before moving again. And to be honest, that's pretty weird for a hacker. And the second reason why I don't think this is a government hack is just simply because the government response. If the government got hacked for 40 million, they'd announce it. They'd launch an investigation. They'd put out a press release. We're investigating a potential security breach. But there's honestly been nothing from the government just yet, right? The government would love to announce, hey, we are working on this, right? We're looking to find all of this. But at the end of the day, they didn't announce anything just yet. And so why would the government stay quiet about getting hacked unless they're embarrassed or it wasn't a hack of there's could be some government incompetence here where the government accidentally sent the Bitcoin to the wrong address or they lost access to it. Now, this is a little bit more insane, right? Because of course, how do you send $40 million and why would you do it all in one transaction, right? But here's the thing. The government has done dumber shit than this before, to be quite blunt about it, right? So when you keep breaking down how the US government is unable to hold Bitcoin, you got to ask yourself the question, right? If they're unable to secure their own, how are they able to essentially, seize your assets and protect you, right? Because I think at the end of the day, when you keep breaking down how the US government is holding Bitcoin, it begs the question, what the hell is going on here, right? So obviously, you guys, in a situation like this, you don't want to sell, right? You want to keep access to as much Bitcoin as you can, but sometimes you need liquidity, right? So you don't need to lose your access to your Bitcoin. You could simply borrow against it if you use Salt Lending. You could go to saltlending.com/green-candle or the link down below. They're going to give you guys an exclusive offer for Green Candle listeners. And you can scroll on down. It's got 9.95%, 1, 3, or 5 year term durations at 70% LTV with no prepayment fees. And I believe they will give you 50 basis points off if you use the link down below. So you guys have to do that to get one of the best rates in the industry. And let's just face it here, folks. When we're looking at this Bitcoin quote unquote crackdown, right? Is there going to be a full-fledged launch criminal investigation when it comes to this, right? Or are they just going to say, oh, it's just a kid at the end of the day? And exactly, right? Zay in the chat is saying, we're talking about the phases, codes. One corrupt individual can share this info and easily steal the Bitcoin for sure. And, I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at this, the U.S. government and, other aspects, right? I mean, like Jamie Dimon, the world's largest bank, right? JP Morgan. They manipulated the precious metals market, which we've seen kind of going crazy for a while, right? They've manipulated the precious metals market, but also they've been sold fake gold and silver before, right? Gold bars marked with fake logos slipped into JP Morgan's vaults. So, it's kind of crazy. I used to work in a bank. For those of you guys who have followed along with me for a while, and that bank suffers millions of fraud literally every single day. And so when you have true final, responsibility, let's say, when it comes to these transactions, things like this can happen. But this is why we need more sophisticated holding mechanisms, right? Because at the end of the day, if it's simple, right? If we're trusting some sort of third party and we're seeing how this is humming, right? You see how the power of Bitcoin and your ability to essentially, let's say, go anonymous, and your ability to, I guess, wash the money, so to speak, right? For lack of a better term here. But essentially, you can mix, you could do all these different things. This is why the United States government doesn't trust any of these privacy tools that they're building out, right? Because they don't know what to do with it. They can't even hold their own Bitcoin. They don't even know what the hell they're doing, right? So it's possible it was just incompetence, but the more likely story is this was an inside job. Someone with access to that government wallet, right, has that ID, and an agent or someone with authorized access just took it. Now, I know that sounds somewhat crazy, but let me remind you that the government has employees that steals all the time. There's been cases of IRS agents stealing taxpayer funds. There's DEA agents that have been stealing drug money during raids, Secret Service agents against stealing Bitcoin during investigations. In fact, during the original Silk Road investigation, 2 federal agents, Secret Service and DEA, stole Bitcoin from that case. And one of them stole $800,000 worth. The other stole even more. And they both went to prison. So we know that the government employees will steal Bitcoin, crypto, if they have access to it. And that's the thing. The people who have access to these wallets are not all crypto or Bitcoin experts, right? They don't have the ideology of Bitcoiners at the end of the day, right? They just simply have the access to it. And we've seen them do it before, right? The feds have seized $15 billion from pig butchering camps. And this was literally back in October of last year. And the irony of all of this is that the United States, if you go back to 2025 and before, has continually seized all of these different guys, right? So now, when you see how this is going, right? The U.S. is saying rules for thee, but not for me, essentially, right? They're seizing all these governments, and they're talking about, seizing the $60 billion worth of Bitcoin that Venezuela allegedly has, right? The crypto ties, the $60 billion from Bitcoin speculations, right? And then at the end of the day, they're worried about all this. So the U.S. is forming that crypto collaboration with the United Kingdom in order to essentially tighten up the security so they know who has what Bitcoin where. I mean, that's essentially what this whole thing is all about, right? The U.S. government wants the ability to seize your Bitcoin. And with that ability to seize your Bitcoin, what do they need? They need the KYC. They need to be able to track you. They need to be able to know that what you're doing is in the right intentions of the U.S. government, right? And they get to do they get to subjectively, put these rules on to all of us to essentially say, hey, at the end of the day, this is better for the U.S., right? It's all their judgment. And then they'll seize all of this like they did with the Bitfinex. And, then some 22-year-old kid is essentially able to fool them and steal $40 million worth. So you got to ask yourself, what the hell is going on, right? How could this happen to the United States government? Why weren't they more secure with all of this, right? And you got to ask yourself about the custody that the United States government is doing, because, it's not only a custody scenario for the U.S. government, but there's also, the custody scenario for these big Bitcoin ETFs. Now, there's always been rumors of Coinbase holding, or issuing paper Bitcoin. And, at the end of the day, we saw Baldylocks, good old Brian Armstrong, going all buddy-buddy with these different governments, right? We saw Brian Armstrong talking about tokenization for companies, talking about all these different things at the WEF, the World Economic Forum, right? And he was so excited to go to that week in Davos, and how he was, sporting this T-shirt and pink tie type of thing. And Coinbase holds 9 of the 11 Bitcoin ETFs in the United States, right? So when you think about how much Coinbase has already been hacked multiple times, right? Sure, maybe you're saying, oh, it was just for data or other things, but we don't know if Coinbase is actually holding all of the Bitcoin that they currently claim to be holding for all of these different actors. And we've seen Brian Armstrong start to get into bed with Donald Trump. He's met with him at Mar-a-Lago. He's obviously at Davos. I mean, how secure is all of this? You've got to ask that question. And if you're a United States citizen and you're seeing how the U.S. is essentially just, seizing Bitcoin, So sure, we're taking stuff that maybe isn't rightfully ours. Okay. But then taking it a step further, we're letting other people steal it from us because of the incompetence of the United States government. This is the biggest issue here, right? Because, even though we have an asset that's, at $89,000, right? And basically the best performing asset since it was created back in 2008 and mined the first block in 2009. I mean, when we look and break this down, it's like, how do we let this guy who's taking selfies and, posting about it on Telegram, how did we let him steal from us? Well, it's because we didn't simply secure our Bitcoin. Now, the best way that I think you guys can do that to avoid this is get yourself a Trezor. I got the Safe 7. I think it's the best and easiest to use hardware wallet in the game. I've got the Bitcoin only edition because, you guys see where I'm at. I'm in beautiful Colombia. If you guys are travelers or you guys don't want to always plug into a computer, the Trezor Safe 7 has Bluetooth capabilities, so you can use it and connect it to your phone if you'd like. But you can't stop there. You have to back it up on some metal backup so you don't get any type of, let's say, any type of issue with this, right? So you won't get your Bitcoin seized if you have it on a hardware wallet like Trezor and your seed phrase stored on something like a crypto steal. Because if you have it saved on the cloud, that's how you can get hacked, and that's where you run into trouble. There's affiliate links for both down below. Make sure you go to the affiliate link so that helps your boy out. But not only that, use promo code GreenCandle for 10% off of your crypto steal as well. And Zay is in the chat telling me, yeah, these people are not dumb. They know what's going on. The show is over. And I agree with you. I mean, Trump essentially went straight for the crypto vote, right? I mean, like you saw it when I showed it at the beginning of this episode or the beginning of this live stream. They're having a full-fledged announcement in 2 days to essentially tell us that, hey, we're going to become the crypto capital of the world. That's their idea, right? But when you keep looking into how the U.S. is treating and acting when it comes to Bitcoin, it leads the question, right? Do these guys actually understand the asset? Do they actually understand all this? Or are they simply just grifting? That's what worries me with this is that what is going to be some of the layover consequences from the United States government once we continue to see this. Make sure you guys are smoking that like Cheech and Chong, hitting that subscribe button, telling a friend to tell a friend, and I'll catch you guys all at the next one.